Hi, it's Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and today we're going to talk about email security, cloud security, and we are with one of Gartner's cool vendors in this space, Great Horn, and the CEO of Great Horn, Kevin O'Brien. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Doug.
So you're a cool vendor, and that means you've kind of started to establish yourself in a space that, as I kind of interpret Gartner, is kind of emerging. Email security. Tell me a little bit about how you came to get to that space and what Great Horn's looking to do.
Certainly. So the email security market is actually a very old market. It goes back at least 20 years. But many of the vendors who exist in that space were built to solve the problems that we had 20 years ago. The concern that you had was that someone tripped over the patch cable and took the Exchange server offline. And so these guys were building solutions, and good solutions, for those kinds of things, what we call email deliverability challenges, like spooling so that if your mail server was offline, you didn't just lose your email. Archiving, so if the hard drive crashed, you could get that mail back. Thing is, those aren't the problems we face today. These days, you're far more likely to see a large data breach begin because someone inside your organization was targeted with a phishing attack. And those targeted phishing attacks, which are different from what you might get as a consumer, where you see the fake bank account alert that tells you that you've just gotten wired $1 million. These are hyper-targeted versions of them for businesses, where someone impersonates a chief financial officer and says, I need you to send this wire out. Or,
I've gotten a few of those,
sure,
actually.
Everybody does. And it's the number one cause of data breaches. Over 93% of all major incidents in the security world start with this kind of an email attack. And these legacy solutions, they really aren't built for solving this problem. That's what we do.
And it really has come about with this kind of massive movement to the cloud. I mean, certainly Microsoft has transformed their business around Office 365 and really gotten away from that server-based approach.
That's right. That's right. And we actually announced a partnership with Microsoft way back at the very beginning of the company in 2015. We went through an accelerator program called Techstars, and so we launched the business in New York City. And we did the onstage thing with the little microphone and talked about the challenge. But we were lucky enough that at that point, Microsoft had already recognized the value of what we were doing for helping them promote Office 365 to the Fortune 500, which is what our typical client looks like. And so we work very closely with both Google and Microsoft to solve these kinds of challenges because it's absolutely true. Those are the things that are driving business for them, these cloud-native platforms and cloud-native email.
And it's really inbound that's the biggest threat these days, obviously. And the enterprise, the large enterprise, Fortune 500, those folks are really have migrated now effectively to cloud-based email.
They've either migrated already or they're in the process of finalizing that migration. We see very few large organizations who are saying we're not planning on moving into this space. What's different today from even 2 or 3 years ago, my background is in cloud security, so I've gotten to see what I would say are the first 2 waves of this adoption, from the toe in the water that we saw, say, circa 2011, 2012, to data storage being moved there, 2013, 2014, to today where we're seeing front office concerns, email and other things that impact the life of the average user, now transitioning to these cloud environments. But as you look at that, the market has very slowly adopted these technologies, especially for large enterprises. But today, as service contracts run out on legacy hardware, data centers are being spun down, the cost savings and the collaboration benefits that these Office 365 or G Suite platforms bring are just tremendous. And we're seeing that now reach its sort of final maturity stage within the Fortune 500 especially.
So now this is we think of things here at Solutions Review as kind of nice to haves and have to haves. This strikes me as more on the have to have side of town. What's the business case that you bring to the table when you're talking to somebody about email security?
It's a great question. So here's the thing. Office 365, G Suite, Google's offering, these are fundamentally secure platforms. Nobody's hacking into them. No one's walking into a data center and grabbing a hard drive that has all your email. But you as a business have unique concerns. Things like, do we allow for the CFO to send an email to someone saying we're going to initiate a wire? Do we send W-2s and other tax information over email? One of our clients, a CISO at a Fortune 500, once said to me, we think about email as the absolute most trusted daily use system that's the least secure in our entire business. Right. And that challenge is one that requires that you have a way to adapt your security to your specific needs. Great Horn is designed to be that level of additional protection. So we aren't volumetric anti-spam. We're not stopping the fake website links that you get that are trying to get you to buy something. Rather, we're the targeted phishing protection layer. We're stopping the fake links that are trying to get your credentials. We're stopping the fake and fraudulent financial transaction emails people receive. That kind of protection needs to both be highly automated. We can talk more about why as we think about the market and the lack of information security talent, but it also has to be highly configurable and tunable to your specific organization. And the only way to do that is with a layer of protection that goes beyond what you get natively from a cloud platform. But it shouldn't look like and can't look like technology that was built 20 years ago to protect against email loss. That's not our concern. So we built this with a platform based on concepts like machine learning and automation and artificial intelligence, which have sadly become industry buzzwords. They've lost much of their meaning. You can play a fun game, ask a vendor to define what machine learning is for if you can. But if you look at what those technologies really enable, they're that additional protection that companies need to safeguard email from these leading phishing causes of major data breaches or information loss.
So who in the organization do you connect with? Who's reaching out to you? Who do you really tag at the sales cycle level?
Yeah, we almost always are engaging directly with the Chief Information Security Officer or CISO. Occasionally, organizations will look at email still as having a layer of responsibility that belongs to a CIO. And those folks have teams that will work with us, and so our end users are usually information security analysts. But the problem, the one where the CFO is getting these impersonation emails and calls up the CISO and says, just make this stop, that's a CISO level concern, and that's whom we work with.
And so what might hold somebody back from making things stop? I mean, what is is there some sort of homegrown solution that people are coming up with to try to prevent that sort of thing, or do they think immediately to kind of reach out to you?
Yeah, that's also a very good question because it opens up a really interesting component to what you're talking about. People often do think initially, oh, we can do this ourselves. And we have walked into myriad Fortune 500 to Global 1000 companies where the information security teams, who are very intelligent and very well trained, are building just complex PowerShell scripts. They're doing things manually and they're trying to keep up with the risk through in-house solutions. Or they're trying to augment what they can do with that kind of approach through what the cloud platforms themselves allow, and building often hundreds or thousands of rules inside of their online O365 Exchange instance or Google control panel. The problem is one of resource. The typical organization will see about 1/10 to 0.2% of all of their mail as phishing related, which sounds very small.
That sounds huge, actually, to me.
Until you start thinking about millions of messages every day coming through. And so we've done some work and done some research in this. We actually published some research last year where we found that for the typical Fortune 500, to keep ahead of just those targeted phishing attacks would take over 300 hours a week worth of work. And so these homegrown solutions just don't scale. And so when you start looking at 300 hours, do the math. If you pay your typical InfoSec analyst $100K a year, and you're going to dedicate however many of them to this problem, doing nothing but email remediation, it becomes a multi-million-dollar problem for you. This is where Great Horn comes in. We can offer a material improvement to that detection and response time and free those expensive resources up to think about the rest of the security platform that you need to build if you're going to protect a Fortune 500 from not just email threats, but everything else that goes after the resources, finances, and intellectual property they contain.
So share with us a kind of a classic example that you've got with regard to, a larger implementation where you've, started to really show some direct protection that you can report back to that CISO.
Of course. So we walked into a Fortune 500 information technology company about 2 years ago, and they had used one of the large legacy email gateway vendors. These are places that have had experience with things like Proofpoint or Mimecast, Barracuda or Fortinet, good solutions, but they've tried them and they have not brought them with the cloud deployment. And that's actually a really common trend for us. Organizations that shift to the cloud often say, we don't want to continue using a gateway solution. We want to be able to just use Microsoft or just use Google. And then they started feeling this pain. They started seeing these impersonation attacks. We came in and we deployed to them. And our deployments, and this is very, very different from a traditional gateway, took 5 minutes. They have 30,000 employees. They've got over 45,000 mailboxes. 5 minutes later, they were fully protected because we're 100% cloud native. That deployment was the jumping off point for us, and we began looking at and analyzing the mail flow. And not just the external mail that went into a company, that's what gateways can look at and do something about, but they're fundamentally perimeter security controls. We actually can see all the mail that happens inside an organization too, which doesn't flow through an external perimeter or MX route. It's not going to be seen by a gateway. But often, if someone's account is compromised, that's where the real attack surface is. So by blending together this external and internal mail, we can build a complete picture of everything that's happening. So we did that for these guys. About a year ago, they turned on what we call banners, which is where we rewrite suspicious mail. We'll say, Doug, be careful. You've just gotten this message from Kevin, but this isn't really Kevin, and here's why. And whether you're looking at that in front of your computer on Outlook, or you've picked up your iPhone and you're looking at it on something like Apple Mail, which has no plugin infrastructure, that protection is right there inside of that message. These guys are so happy with what they've done with this, they've started printing out screenshots of those and putting them up in the break rooms and saying, we're now, as the security team, investing in this technology.
So you're showing flags as they're happening.
That's right. And they're not just showing them to the InfoSec analysts, they're handing them to the end users and saying, if you now actually take action, once we've put this little flag up, this message up for you, it's an HR event. It means that we can now give some real teeth to the information security program, but we don't have to block you from working with your mail, which is what all of the traditional approaches are. It's a very people-centric approach to security, but it allows the InfoSec team to say, we're not spending all day just looking at false flagged phish messages that someone clicked a button and reported. We're actually providing effective, real security over this problem.
So with regard to moving to the cloud and certainly moving, traditional client-server applications to the cloud, where are we, do you think, in the adoption curve there? I mean, are we far along? I mean, it seems like it's an incredible transformation that's happening.
Yeah, if you look at the industry surveys that a company like BitGlass puts together around cloud adoption, we see that as recently as 6 months ago, 60+% of the Fortune 500 either have moved fully to the cloud or have a cloud native strategy. And we're seeing now a transition from cloud first to cloud only, meaning that companies went from making a decision point about whether or not they wanted to use cloud at all to saying, now we want everything there.
That's amazing that folks that have been so kind of guarded are now so free with their kind of critical applications like that.
I had the opportunity in New York City about 8 months ago to sit down with Amy Hood, who's the Chief Financial Officer of Microsoft. I was on a panel with Amy, and she was talking about how the Fortune 500 are now heavily incentivizing the use of something like Azure, which is the platform as a service level of what O365 provides. And the reason is that for a CFO, the math is simple. You can sit down and say, we can recognize tremendous cost savings and productivity improvements just by going down.
But it's not always the CEO who gets to make that call, right? I mean, there is some certain, concerns with other folks in the organization, which I think is probably part of the holdback, right? Is control and the sense that things are no longer on-prem, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. I think we characterize two different kinds of CISOs because it's typically the security teams that have those concerns. Some of them are very old school and they think about control, but some of them are very progressive and they recognize that by enabling and empowering users to work in a cloud native way, they're going to do that anyways. If you shut down your users and tell them they can't have anything on a cloud environment, they'll just spin up their own instances of these technologies.
Right, exactly.
So you have to now get on the same page as the user base. Say, how do I help you do your job, but not get in the way? If you think about the example I gave of that banner of that exposing the security risk right in the email, in a way that a regular person can comprehend, it starts to shift the responsibility to the end user, but it serves, as Greathorn does, as sort of like a friend in the inbox, giving you information about where a risk really is, rather than, if you look at the alternatives in the market, generic training. Oh, you shouldn't click on links. You should have your mouse cursor. On my phone, what mouse cursor? What do you mean I shouldn't click on links? People always click on links.
Right.
Isn't it better to say, click on a link, but we'll step in and help you if it is actually a security risk. Go ahead and look at the emails that you receive. You're going to anyways, but we're going to give you the additional context you need. Draw the analogy of how we think about fire protection in the real world. We teach kids in elementary school, don't hide in the closet if there's a fire, right? If you hear a smoke alarm, go outside. That's good. That's the equivalent of training. But isn't it good to also have a smoke detector in your house that says there's a fire right now? Right now is the time to maybe go outside, and that's what we do.
Right. Well, Kevin, this has been great. Thanks very much for coming in and sharing what Great Horn is up to. We would encourage you to go to Solutions Review, all of our cybersecurity sites. We have a email marketing site as well, and certainly check out what we're writing about. Check out what Great Horn's up to with regard to email security, cloud security. Greathorn.com. Once again, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, Doug.